We will continue to build on our strong financial foundation through disciplined cost management. We have healthy cash reserves that will be strategically deployed to enable SFF and SANPC to deliver on their mandates. Thank you, Chair. That's it.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Members of Parliament, Chairperson of the Group, as well as Directors and all executives in the room. My name is Xolelwa Ntlango. I am from PetroSA, Executive in the Office of the CEO, who has tendered her apology as explained by Chair Noah earlier. I am together with our CFO, but we are accompanied by our board chairperson, Director Bonakele, to our further left. I will start with the initial part of the presentation, Chair and members, and then hand over to the CFO accordingly. So if we're looking at this initial page, PetroSA's mandate is to ensure security of fuel supply for South Africa, and by participating really across the value chain, upstream, midstream, as well as downstream. And so in the upstream, we've got a number of assets in terms of gas fields, and midstream, it is the refining operation that is in Mossel Bay that has been a cause of much debate earlier on. And then downstream, we do have a limited presence in terms of those 2 retail sites that were mentioned, and also 2 depots situated in Zanin, as well as in Bloemfontein. We therefore seek to fulfill our mandate, Chairperson, through the provision of hydrocarbons and ultimately selling fuels to the end user in the country, but also looking at the export market. So I'm going to proceed to then present the results for the financial year ended. We can stay on that initial page. I'll spend a bit of time on this page. Thank you. Focusing on the lowlights, highlights, and our current position. So currently, as I've mentioned about PetroSA's participation in the value chain, upstream, midstream, and downstream, we currently sustain our business through the buying and selling of finished product. We import finished product, we store it at our Mossel Bay refinery or any other storage location we negotiate with, so that that product can be then distributed to the end customers. At the moment, our customer base lies in Mossel Bay, some in Cape Town, and we have really been putting all efforts to increase the representation of the market to the inland region. So the sales performance that we have seen, Chairperson, for the period in question is that we have recorded low sales volumes against our targets, which has then meant that even in terms of revenue forecast and profitability, we were unable to see a positive profit, as you can see highlighted on the summary page. As mentioned, that we do rely on import and selling of that product, but that revenue needs to continue to support all of our upstream asset base, as well as the resources that are supporting the GTL plant that is non-operational. So yes, we do make revenue through sales, but it's inadequate to cover all of our operating costs. As it stands, about 70% of our operating cost is dedicated to still care and maintain the assets that are not operational at the moment. So structurally, that is a challenge we deal with in terms of ensuring that the bottom line stays positive. So we have seen those low sales, and allow me, Chairperson, just to spend a bit of time in terms of the background and context of what are the factors that have had a material influence in the decline of sales that we see. First of all, it is true that in terms of our market penetration, we have had dependencies on few and key major customers. And in this case, Eskom is one of them. And as we have seen Eskom improve its operations, we have therefore seen them need less and less supply of diesel from PetroSA. And so this meant that we are then exposed because the other markets that we supply, which is the commercial market, the industrial markets, maybe and the mining markets, were not at a point where they could replace that volume that we have lost as a result of the entity or the major customer that has improved its operations. And so to superimpose on then, the question would be, why haven't you then increased significantly the volumes that you are able to sell to the remaining markets and customers? I would like to highlight, Chairperson, that we also have faced challenges in terms of our ability to price effectively. And by this statement, Chairperson, what is meant is that, yes, we import product, we buy it. In a perfect world where PetroSA's debt situation was better than what it is, we would have been able to purchase that product directly from refining companies who manufacture it. But because those companies require us to issue them with letters of credit for them to continue to deal with us in that way, it has then meant that we must find traders in between who are willing to take the risk and supply us the product. And because nothing is free, even them taking that risk is at a cost to us in terms of the interest that we then incur from the money that we are using buying the product from them. And so when we incur that interest, it's a ripple effect really that means that if we must compete in the market to sell to the same customer with a company that has bought directly from a trader, I mean from the refinery, compared to us who have bought from traders, our ability to be flexible on pricing and attractive is hugely impacted by this phenomenon. And so, Chairperson, we are, however, working on a way forward that can assist us because, as we know, we need to still grow the volumes domestically, especially looking at state-to-state transaction where, you know, we could really secure long-term contracts with organs of state to supply them, but also, you know, with other clients. But again, the myriad of this complexity, Chair, that I have painted, it makes it not to be a straight line exercise. And the team is really at work to configure these options in a way that can help us to sustain ourselves in the near term whilst we're working on reinstating the refinery. So I've just made a comment really in terms of why is it that our sales environment is where it is. But Chairperson, the second component of our performance is really hinging on the execution of big capital projects. So for us, as mentioned earlier on, that we're participating really in the three areas of the value chain. Sustainably, the refinery needs to get back online because continuing to import product is showing us as unsustainable. And so it is our strategic objective to reinstate the refinery. And Chair, I will spend a bit of time to address the questions that were asked earlier on in terms of the GTL refinery and partnership with Gazprom Bank. And I will address that by providing just a brief overview of our relationship with Gazprom Bank, where it started, and when it ended, why did it end, and what is the way forward. So PetroSA went on an RFP process in order to secure partners that would assist it in reinstating the GTL refinery. Because the refinery had closed, as mentioned earlier on, due to a low supply of gas. And so to reinstate this refinery, it would mean that we need to consider other feed sources other than the gas that is depleted so that we could ensure continuity. And so when Gazprom Bank Africa, whom we partnered with, who was a subsidiary of Gazprom Bank, as we know, the global entity, so their role would then be to partner us through the exercise. And the exercise at the time was going to start at the point of FID, developing detailed business cases and exploring the different options that PetroSA could take in terms of reinstatement, but also to then bring the funding that would be needed to implement the most feasible option. And so we went into partnership with them, and we had set some milestones for them as our partner. For example, April 24, they needed to have completed FID, financial investment decision, and that would have been followed by a detailed 3 options analysis in terms of exploring which are the viable options we are going to take and how much they would cost. But Chairperson, when those dates had arrived, we did not receive the requirements that we had stated to the potential partner. We did issue some extensions, but as of January 2025, we still had not received any of the requirements that had been mentioned, despite the additional time that had been afforded. And so that caused us to then explore the option to exit the relationship, because the longer we stay with the GTL not reinstated, that cost to reinstate also grows, because as much as the plant is under preservation, but it's like a car must move. Otherwise, if it just stays parked, there will be more and more damage coming up. So then to the actual questions that were asked in terms of why is it that we've exited that relationship, that has been the basis, honorable members, in terms of then exiting so that we could then reimagine or reconfigure our way forward. What is clear, Chairperson and members, in terms of a way forward is that we still need funding to be able to reinstate that refinery. We won't be able to do it on our own. And so since exiting the relationship, the internal team at PetroSA has actually done it on its own, which is the analysis of the 3 options that are being considered to reinstate the refinery. So these 3 options, These 3 options, Chairperson, they did appear on a page that I haven't recorded now from the group presentation, but essentially we then have a roadmap, because the 46 kilobarrels per day refinery that is down, we know that we also can't reinstate it all to that full capacity all at once. So we do have a phased approach, which is premised on the 3 options. So phase 1 is to basically restart that current refinery we have and run it at 18,000 kilobarrels per day. Run it at 18,000 kilobarrels per day using imported feedstock. Because remember, the problem of depleted feedstock reserves hasn't been resolved yet. And so the timeline for that is to, by 2027 financial year, have reinstated the part of the refinery that is there, that was just shut down, using the liquid loop of the refinery, importing condensate that will be processed. So if you talk refinery terms, that volume is very low. We're talking in the country, previous refineries that would run at 108 kilo barrels a day. So to talk 18 is a very low number, but we are starting somewhere. And if that number is very low, it's already an indicator about the challenge in terms of commerciality of running at those low rates, which is again the reason why the plant was shut down, because the feedstock was low, the rates were low, and it wasn't commercial. But our way forward is to start there. And as we start there, we need to then ramp up the rate to 46 kilo barrels per day. And that ramp-up project is also intense because it must take into account the Clean Fuels 2 requirements. So as we ramp up, we must make sure that we are compliant with the Clean Fuels requirement, which will be in fact 2027. And that piece of work will also take us until, I think, 2032, which is the reinstatement of the ramped up refinery. In parallel to that, because we know that our strongest asset and value is in the gas fields that we have. And so to reinstate imported liquid really does not do enough leverage in terms of the resources that we have. So in parallel to this exercise, there will be work done in the fields to basically get more gas reserves, bringing gas up, because the reason the plant closed was the gas we had access to was inadequate. So there's also, in terms, and we will get to the projects list, but in terms of then our upstream projects, quite a lot of work also being put into making sure that we can develop the gas reserves we have, and again, continue to pump money through the gas loop refinery. And again, Chair, as I've said, that the economics of refining is in the numbers. You need to process more for your margins to look up. And so as we'll start with 18 kBL, ramp up to 46 kBL, we will then also be looking at bigger expansion plans in terms of the, beyond a 5-year period. So, Chair, I've said a lot for an opening page, but I thought it was important to, as we highlight the context of where PetroSA finds itself, we also just provide a bit more detail in terms of the factors that have contributed to us ending up where we are. Lastly, Chairperson, there was a specific question in relation to Gazprom Bank that was asked about ESA. And so when we had entered the partnership with Gazprom Bank Africa at the very beginning, they were actually going to go to our local DFIs to look for money. But when they then became or were added to the sanctions list, which was, I think, early December of 2024, then the local DFIs kind of started also pulling out. And so to that extent, we had also had our own negotiation with ESA. They were going to fund or co-fund part of the feasibility study. But upon GBA, which is Gazprom Bank Africa, being listed on the sanctions list, ESA then, started pulling back and really stated to us that they were unwilling to co-fund with them. And so that would have been the reason why financially, there were some issues pertaining also to their involvement within the deal. And so now that we have exited that relationship, Chairperson, it's part of what we are working on. So as I've spoken about the options, we are looking at hybrid funding models, which would mean that we do engage the local DFIs and other sovereign funds in terms of the extent to which they can fund us. So I think I can talk timeline and detail later on, but for now I'll just hand hand over to you, CFO, to do the financial part.
Thanks, Ms. Ntlango. Good afternoon, Chair of the Portfolio Committee, honorable members of the committee, DG, the group chairperson of the CEF Group, the directors in the room, colleagues. Chair, I will be presenting the financial statements, looking at the company as well as the consolidated at the group level. I must mention, Chair, that when we talk of the group, we include Ghana, PetroSA Ghana Limited, which I must also mention that entity.
Can we have one mic switched off?
Sorry, apologies, Chair. That entity received a clean audit from AGSA. And then also in the group, we have PetroSA Rehabilitation, non-profit company that is housing the decommissioned funds that also received a clean audit from AGSA. Looking at the financial performance, the statement of the financial position, which is the balance sheet. Chair, we're looking at the non-current assets that we have as audited by AG. At the company level, we can see the value that is sitting at 340 million, while at the group level, we're sitting at 3 billion. We do have the refinery that has fully impaired. Reason for it to be fully impaired, at each balance sheet, they do a revaluation, comparing the carrying amount together with the cash generating unit. As we are aware, the refinery has not been producing, therefore there's no volumes that are coming from the refinery. My colleague has spoken in length with regards to what is happening and what are the plans for us to utilize the refinery to have it back on stream so that we can be able to produce and sell the product out of the refinery. There was a question that touched a bit on that with regards to the operation of the refinery and no sales that are taking place as we are only importing. Chair, then also with the movement that we see, there is only in relation to the impairment and amortization, as I've already indicated. And then in terms of our intangible assets, these are the rights that we have, both at company level, our exploration right and the production right that we have in Ghana. As we know, Ghana is producing and we are getting benefits from that operation. Also, we do have the investment in subsidiary that we have recorded, and which consists of our investment in Ghana, which gets eliminated at consolidation because we take the items on line-by-line basis for consolidation purposes. Also, Chair, looking at loans receivables. Loans receivables is in relation to the funds that have been paid by the company PetroSA to establish our subsidiaries. We do evaluate those funds as we have recorded them in our records. Moving on to our current assets. We're looking at our current assets, the inventory. We have seen there's a decline on our inventory if you compare the previous financial year with the current financial year at company level. Ms. Ntlango has already touched on our inability to directly source the product from the refineries, to which now we need to only purchase from the traders, which is something sometimes make it very difficult for us to log these deals, considering that our unhealthy balance sheet does affect us negatively. This is something, Chair, that while we're looking at the financial statement for March 2025, it did have an impact currently, which when we come back, those results will be reflecting. I think one of the members did mention this, what we're presenting today, and the possibility of it continuing in this current financial year. And then in terms of our cash and cash equivalents, while we see there is 1.6 billion at the group level, and at company level, we're sitting at 1.3 billion. When we look at our liabilities, that was not an exciting position for us because it does not reflect a good performance that we have, having funds in the balance sheet in the bank, while our creditors have not been honored. Moving quickly to our non-current liabilities, the provision that we see, that is in relation to the provision for decommission liability, which one of the points that was raised is the shortfall that we have. I've mentioned that we do have 3 billion that is sitting at a rehabilitation entity as an investment that was, or a loan that was made by PetroSA company, while our provision is sitting at 10 billion. The plans for funding that shortfall, because that is one area that AG also do point out to us. There's about that 6.2 billion. We have invested that 3 billion. It started at 1.5 billion when it was provided by the shareholder being PetroSA to the rehabilitation company. It grew from that 1.5 to the 3 billion that we see today. We continue to invest this money on the money market so that we can be able to grow the amount. It is moving quite slowly because we're getting about 8% on these funds that we have invested. We did approach the market to verify what instruments that are available out there for us to grow these funds quicker than what it is, considering the NEMA Act that which has not necessarily been promulgated because the date has been moved. That requires that whatever provision that you have, the funds equivalent to that provision should be in place. So we understand those requirements and the pressure to have those funds increase. So the proposal that we received to invest these funds in another platform, we realized that there could be potential tax challenges that would incur, which could have an impact on reducing those funds further. Hence, we're still remaining with these funds within the money market, which is a more protected platform that we have, because the Act does require us not to compromise the capital that we have in this for these funds, and we restrict it as such. So that is the plan that we have really on that shortfall. And as soon as we have the refined back on stream, as well as locking profits, as we have done in the past, we would be able to start building up on those funds until we get to the point that we have sufficient that is covering the provision in our financials. Jumping quickly to the current liabilities, where I would like to spend a bit of a time. If you look at our current liabilities, they are sitting at the time at 9.4 billion at company level, while at the group level sitting at 9.7. I will point the chair and the members quickly to our current assets, which are sitting at company level 3.9 billion, and at the group level at 7.6. This position have not changed. We're currently sitting in October 2025, looking at our current liabilities exceeding our current assets, meaning we are unable to honor our liabilities as they fall due. This situation has come to a point where one of the suppliers, maybe let me put it this way, we are required to pay South African Revenue Services for the clearing and the movement of the product when we are selling it in Mossel Bay. That money has not been paid over on a regular basis to SARS. We do declare so that we make sure that we comply with the declaration. But in terms of the payment, that has not gone through. As such, as early as last week on Tuesday, we had SARS in our premises coming to discuss with us what are the plans for PetroSA to honor this obligation. And that conversation followed with a letter of notification saying to PetroSA, give us a payment plan to settle this amount. How are we going to settle this amount? In the absence of that, rather, the letter required PetroSA to respond to SARS by Friday coming. While we were looking into that, the letter continued to say, in the absence of any payment plan, we will go and hold your refinery, meaning attach the refinery to recover their amount of about 4.5 billion rands. What I've said earlier, looking at our balance sheet on the PPE, that refinery at this point in time in our financials, at the company level, it's sitting at 340 million, while we owe SARS about 4.5 billion, meaning the chances of that attachment won't cover sufficiently what they are anticipating to get in at the refinery. Yesterday, I received a notification. Chair, I felt this is something now, because we are sitting here, I think it's information that I can share with the committee. As of yesterday, we received a call from SARS stating that they are going to Mossel Bay to identify the assets that they will attach. They also informed us, while they will attaching these assets, they will allow us to continue operating the asset. However, we cannot do anything. It cannot be transferred to anyone. We cannot encumber to anyone, because the title, based on the communication that we are expecting to get from SARS, obviously, they are holding the asset as a guarantee on the amount that we owe them. So that is one area, Chair, in the committee, that really, with the reports that we've been bringing on PetroSA deteriorating position, it has come to a point where some of the suppliers that we have, which is SARS, has come to us and say, enough, we want our money. Apart from SARS, we also owe the product suppliers. We indicated earlier that it's difficult even to buy directly from the refineries. We're depending on the traders. So if we default on the traders, that means it's going to make life even difficult for us, while they are willing to assist us in terms of providing the product on an open account basis. By us defaulting, it put us in a very difficult position, as reflected in our balance sheet, that our liabilities exceed the assets that we have. Current assets we're talking about, as well, if you can look at the total liabilities, that's sitting at 20 billion at the group level, and the total asset that is sitting at 13 billion, which shows that a negative shareholders' contribution, which is part of equity. This is due to the cumulative losses that we're making year on year that we're reporting on. If I move on from the balance sheet, the statement of the financial position, now to the statement of profit and loss. Chair and members, we did indicate there was a reduction in terms of the revenue that we have reported on at year end. The reasons have already been shared by my colleague on the revenue. I want to point to the gross profit. If you can look at our gross profit that we have reported, or we have recorded at company level, that's sitting at 319 million. However, I want to point to the members quickly to our operating expenses, sitting at 3.4 billion. Meaning the only amount that we've managed to make out of our own operation, the buy and sell, was 319 million, while we're incurring 3.5 billion. So what we have generated could not cover our OPEX that we're incurring to run the refinery. Hence, you see the creditors number escalating the manner it does. It is due to the picture that is depicted here in the profit and loss statement. I think the reasons, we're still having the refinery, we still have to man, as also my colleague have indicated, similar to the car that you would have, it must be running for it to be maintained at a particular status for us to be able to bring it back. Because should we close it completely, that means the cost for us to incur to start and fixing the things that were not being kept moving could escalate further. Chair, I won't go to other items on this. As I've indicated, there's impairment related to the investment in Ghana that we have to log, we have to record, which is a non-cash item. And then also, as I've indicated, we do have our operating costs. Largely, these have been consistent with the previous financial year, with just inflationary increase that we see. However, it's not sustainable. And I think this is one area to whom the AG have placed emphasis on, where they've also indicated that due to these continuous losses that we're making, as well as the asset and liabilities not in sync, there's material uncertainty on the going concern. Although we do provide to AGSA all the supporting documentation for the initiatives that we are putting in place to make sure that we sustain the organization year on year. Hence, we have been given an opinion of unqualified audit finding with unqualified opinion with findings. Is because of the initiatives that we have and the evidence that was presented to the AG to reflect that PetroSA does do put plans in place to make sure that the company does continue to operate. If we move on to the statement of cash flow, Chair, I think with this one, there's not much movement that has happened. As we can see, that under cash from operating activities, with the subsidiaries, we are in a positive position, while at the company level, we had a negative movement with regards to cash from operations, as well as the dividend that we received from Ghana. As we've indicated, this is one of the assets that is operating commercially, and it does contribute to assist PetroSA in terms of the cash and to boost the financial statements. Then in terms of our investing activities, these are just movement in our fixed assets and to do the impairment and the depreciation that we process. There was no investment that was made specifically in that area. And then in terms of our financing activities, we only see the movement basically on the lease liability that we have. This is in Ghana, where we have leased and floating production storage to keep our production while it is being generated until it gets to a point where it can be sold and then it's sold from there. So as JV partners, this is what we have at the FPSO. There is a plan which will report on that in the following financial year to purchase our own FPSO so that we don't have to have these lease liabilities. Okay, I'm not sure that, should I continue on the findings? Okay, maybe let me continue, Chair, on the findings and respond to some of the questions. Then Ms. Ntlango is going to come back and do the scorecard as well as concluding. Then in terms of the AGSA audit findings, as they were looking at 3 areas as they do their audit, which is the annual financial statements, the audit of predetermined objectives, as well as the compliance with policies, legislation, and regulation. With regards to the financial statements, there were findings that were picked up in that area, which emanating from, we do have some dormant entities when we're engaged in a number of projects outside of the country. There were entities that were established. Those entities have not necessarily been deregistered with CIPC. Internal processes have already been done, but CIPC have delayed in deregistering these entities. As such, we are not preparing financials for these entities because it's zero. There's no movement, there's no activity. Once we prepare the financials, AG will want to audit the financials, which is the cost for us on something that there's no benefit and value we're getting from that. So that is the conscious decision that was made by the board, because there's no impact that it have, but AG obviously do raise this. Also, in terms of, as I've indicated on the assets, that are fully depreciated, AG want us to go and do the physical verification, which again, we have engaged them with regards to this. In terms of the financials that they're auditing, there's no impact, the item they are raising that we see. The item that really needed attention from ourselves is the physical dips on the inventory that we are reporting on, because this is a high value item where when they did the dip and what was sitting on the system were not aligned. So this is a matter of internal control where now we have make sure that there is a reconciliation that is done, which is monitored, reviewed, and signed off by a senior official, including the accounts, the payables account, as well as the receivable statutory account that we're maintaining. Then there was no finding in terms of the audit of the predetermined objectives. However, with regards to the audit they perform on compliance with policies and regulation, which I will also touch on the irregular expenditure that was reported on at the group level. There was no finding on the SCM process. With regards to trading, a separate and a different policy was established, and it needed some updates that the auditors, when they look at it, they felt there were some inconsistencies with what was happening when we go to the market, such as there's a trading window, there's outside of the trading window. So they required that policy to be updated. At the time of them doing the audit, the policy was not yet finalized at the pre-audit stage. However, but by the time they completed the audit, that trading policy was finalized and approved by the board. And then the other finding they've raised, which ended up being an irregular expenditure. When the trading team went to the market to request the bid for the supply of the product, there was a criteria that was mentioned, which stated that all the bids must be received by 5 o'clock. However, then there was a bid that was received 3 minutes after 5 o'clock. When they did the evaluation, they included everything, including that bid, without disqualifying that supply. And it so happened that supply was the most economical for us because the other ones were very expensive if we were to lock on that deal. So the transaction was concluded on the bidder that submitted 3 minutes late. At the time, it was not condoned and it was not reported. That's why it ended up being an irregular expenditure item, although there was no loss to PetroSA as a result of entering into this. It's the governance process that needed to be make sure we have complied with. And then the other item was in terms of the fruitless and wasteful expenditure. PetroSA incurred an amount of about 5.8 million on the fruitless and wasteful expenditure. One of the items of about 2.2 million was in relation to the delay in paying PAYE. As we know, PAYE is deducted from employees. So, but there was, I think, a day delay in making that payment. Obviously, once you delay SARS immediately, there's a penalty, there's an interest. So that is the reason of that fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Also, there was a work that was done by the department where an injury took place at the refinery, but it was not reported. So there was a fine, because that is the requirement in terms of the HSEQ processes. Lastly, before I can hand over to my colleague, consequence management there were 5 instances of allegations around the financial misconduct, which were not necessarily investigated to establish whether there was any wrongdoing. So AG also picked this one up, stating that consequence management have not been conducted. However, you conduct consequence management once you establish there was wrongdoing on that particular person or within the process. So due to the lack of resources within the risk and compliance department, this work was not done, and the response that we've received in the plan that we have here with the SANPC that has now have all the employees transferred to SANPC and looking at the resources, this is one area that we said we will be able to make sure it is closed to do the investigations so that the report is being provided and be able to close these audit findings that were raised by AG. Chair, that will be all from me. I'll hand over to my colleague so that he can go back and present the scorecard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will now present PetroSA's performance scorecard for the period ending 31 March 2025. As it can be seen on this table, the key performance areas are highlighted with greater focus and weighting assigned to the optimization of downstream, which would mean that we sought to achieve a target of 2.8 billion liters of sales through the different markets that we are participating in. Also, in terms of profitability, there's various ways at which we sought to improve profitability, being the gross margin percentage, which really hinges on our ability to price favorably. But there's also quite some key milestones in terms of our project execution that we had put up, and we've spoken at length already about the GTL reinstatement partnership. But also similarly with upstream partnerships that we had gone into, we did experience non-performance of the bidders that had been selected. And so as can be seen then that all of the performance measures relating to profitability, productivity, were not achieved as indicated on the scorecard. We see that KPIs in relation to making progress for the gas-to-power project, we did achieve the front-end loading milestones in terms of business case readiness, and also in terms of the decommissioning plan. We can see on the bottom of the table that when it comes to stakeholder engagement, HSSEQ as well as triple BE status, those targets were achieved. And often a question we get asked on the triple BE is, I mean, why is that even an issue for us being a state-owned entity? But because of our current business model of buying and selling, previously we had been purchasing from non-BE suppliers, but what has helped us to see this improvement is to basically open up the BE strategy in terms of our product supply strategy. So in summary, the scorecard for 2024-25 performed in the manner displayed with an overall score of 2/5. As a result of the weighting that is attributed to the various KPIs. And so maybe the question then becomes, what is going to be the way forward? I mean, what is a project overview that's taking us to the future? Again, that's a busy slide. But essentially here, Chairperson, we also then highlight, our key project programs in terms of the upstream, the midstream, as well as the downstream. And to someone that may seem like we're doing too many things, why can't we focus on just one big thing? But the reality as well is that where PetroSA finds itself is, you know, we've got to do some care work, maintenance work on some of the aspects so that we can be able to do the big bang reinstatement projects later. So with some of this, you know, the flavor and nature of these projects, if I could just focus on a portfolio level, upstream, we are looking at initiatives that help us to get more gas out. Because for us to start printing money out of that refinery again, we have to flow gas, which is the resource that we have that we won't be buying from anyone. And so this is why you'll see that on our upstream portfolio, there's quite a number of different initiatives that are looking at being able to make sure that gas is available. Also, another reason that we kind of do show the different many projects is that when it comes to us looking for funding, we've seen that it assists us in terms of splitting or diversifying the risk. So instead of going with one big bucket to one big funder, we can go with multiple small buckets to multiple funders. And so this is the approach that justifies why we do see multiple items here. And then in terms of our midstream portfolio, as we have emphasized the importance that we continue being able to buy and sell product, the distribution infrastructure is very important to be able to support that objective. And as you will see then that in the midstream portfolio, there's quite a lot of distribution infrastructure work in terms of the SPM and CBMs, because that is essentially the reticulation infrastructure that makes sure that we can receive and evacuate imported product effectively. And then again, downstream, focusing on really being able to diversify our product offering. So as you know, currently we are focused on the white products, which is diesel, petrol, as well as jet fuel. But where possible, we are looking, in fact, we have started to make entry with really promising margins in terms of the lubricants market, as well as making inroads in terms of being able to leverage of the ENH partnership in terms of gas sales. So in conclusion, Chairperson, the picture we've painted for PetroSA is really complex and filled with lots of reds. But we know that in the immediate focus, we are focusing on stabilizing the current business through growing the sales portion that is operational, whilst we are making the inroads to be able to execute the big projects. And as you can see on this page on the far right, the key risk that we face with most of our material projects is funding. And so, as we have mentioned, that the big focus now is to be able to dissect our portfolio and be able to, you know, look for hybrid funding models in a way where the risk is minimized and shared across different stakeholders. Chairperson, that's where I will conclude the PetroSA presentation for the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Saidin, what was the name of that priest, the pastor who was a CEO at some point? Huh? Zondo.
Colleague Zono.
Yeah, the executive manager reminds me of that that man. He would
We
come
need to
here
research
and
him.
promise a lot of things. And then when we want to hold him accountable in the next meeting, another story. So don't fall into that trap if you are going to still come back here. Honorable members, that is the presentation. Any interaction to the presentation? I will take Honorable Lorima, Honorable Mhlongo, Honorable Slepe, Honorable Senne. Maybe to start, okay, you have a problem as you are sitting here of SARS. What are you going to do? When you get out of here, what is the plan to deal with that problem? Which I think could have been avoided, in my view, but it is here. What is the plan when you live here? What is the status of the asset in Zanin? What is it doing? I'm asking this because one CEO came here and wanted to sell it because it was no longer serving the purpose. But I can hear you are saying Bloemfontein and Zanin are still operating. What are they doing? That was PetroSA. SFF, is there a reason why the Saldanha, Milnerton, and Montague assets are on lease and assigned, and Avedia and Lionfield are sold? There's a buying by Sunpack. The economics in you, can you explain in simple terms why the others are bought and sold, the others are on lease and assigned? Since 2019, when I sit here, the presentation about the Milnerton tanks is the same. It has not changed. We are busy with this and that, and then when you come again, we have withdrawn this because of this. What is really happening in, do you have a plan or you don't have a plan with Milnerton? It's been many years. We are talking about the same thing, and there's nothing coming out of it. Honorable Lorima, you will package my questions with Honorable Lorima's.
It's a horror story. So you're unable to honor your liabilities. So how do you get out of this hole? Does it depend on getting the GTL plant functioning again? And then getting the GTL plant functioning again would seem to depend on finding a partner. Is it going to be possible to find a partner with SARS hanging over your head? So it seems like it's a non-starter. So if all that is the case, can it not be said that PetroSA's continuing operations amount to trading recklessly? And then bluntly, is it the plan to transfer any successful operations of PetroSA to the State Petroleum Company, Sanpac, and then to allow PetroSA to go insolvent so that the debtors lose out, but the state can continue to operate in the oil and gas space?
Responses, please. Okay, SFF.
Let me firstly acknowledge the Milnerton tank farm. It is, we acknowledge that it's been in the works for a long time. Even my chair here and Mr. Makanya and my other fellow SFF board members or board entities, SF entities, also reminds us of this every quarter when we report. We've given, and last year we re-looked at it again, and we realized that the way we were looking at it before of just going in and refurbishing the tank farm and refurbishing it both for crude and for white products without actually having an anchor client at the end of the process is maybe not the right way to go. So we re-looked at it, we reworked the scope of work, and this time around we've decided that we will go out with the RFQ to appoint consulting engineers to provide a cost estimate of 10% accuracy to refurbish and repurpose and recommission just 4 crude oil tanks and for refined products and pipelines and all the other infrastructure that goes along with it. So we asking them to write a new business case for us, while at the same time we are talking to Astron, because that tank farm is interrelated with our Saldanha tank farm with a pipeline, and then there's a pumping station that goes to Astron. So we're talking to Astron as well and saying, Astron, please come back, be the anchor client, and you can then store some of your oil or your white products here. However, there is still some other infrastructure that also needs to go along with it. And one of the suggestions that we also had is that we must start looking at the Saldanha tank farm and the Milnerton tank farm as one complex and one entity, instead of looking at them as 2 separate entities, of the one bringing in oil from Cape Town and the other one bringing in oil in Saldanha, but rather look at the 2 together. So this RFQ that we've got out now, at this moment, that closes on the 12th of December, is we're asking a consulting engineer to write this for us and re-look at it and giving us a new perspective on it with a 10% accuracy, so that when we go out to the market again, we're going out with the right scope of work. Plus, we are having an anchor client at the end of it. So it's looking at the same end product, but from a different point of view. And once we have this consulting engineer, we hope that next time we come back, we'll come back with a different answer. But we do acknowledge that it has been going on for a long time, and we're hoping that this time will be it. Thank you. The other question? Yeah, the chair will.
So in relation to why Avidia and Line 4 was sold, Chair, I think it's basically the type of asset. So Avidia is a 60% shareholding. It's not one of those things that you can actually lease and assign. The situation with SFF is it's a non-profit company, and every transaction that needs to be executed needs to be at fair value. So if we are going to do the fair value for Saldanha, Milnerton, and the Montague terminals, it's going to be quite a substantial amount in terms of fair value, which SANPC would not be in a position to pay right now. So those, when the valuation for those were done for the lease and assign, it was only based on cash inflows and outflows as reflected in the corporate plan. So those assets, due to the fact that we are a non-profit company, because of the fair value aspect, those assets were identified for lease and assign, whereas the Avidia 60% shareholding and Line 4 was a straight disposal to SANPC. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I would like to assist Team PetroSA, if I may, just on the question of SARS, where you asked what exactly is going to be done after, now that we know about SARS. Chair, I think my immediate thought would be that we really need to immediately regroup as a team, because this was, obviously for myself specifically, it was brought to my attention at lunchtime as we're eating. So it really has not allowed one to process. So we need to get together with the team. But I also believe that we need to invoke the intergovernmental relations process as a matter of urgency, and perhaps at an escalated level. Because there are many issues, I think, around the ownership, the claims, the claim from PetroSA to, rather SARS to PetroSA, and also there's some counterclaims. So it actually requires that we sit together and invoke the intergovernmental relations process and then see how we can actually have this matter resolved. So I just wanted to assist them perhaps on that one, because I think at the moment we really don't, have a solution as it's still really fresh. Thank you, Chair. I think with the rest, maybe they can try, and I'll support later if required. And also, Director Bonagele is here.
Before he speaks, on record, you were introduced as the chair of the risk something, and then I don't know whether it was a slip of a tongue from the manager. You were introduced as the chair of the board. So just for clarification, start there and clarify your status, and we correct the records of Parliament.
Thank you very much, Chair, for that question. We're all in a difficult situation, as you all know. We don't have the chair at the moment of the board for reasons that you are well aware of. I've been asked to stand in, as it is normal in the Companies Act that directors nominate someone to run meetings. So that's really what I've been asked to do. I'm not the chair of the board. I do chair meetings, and I have stepped up to assist in the interim. There are 3 board members who are here today, myself and my 2 other colleagues who are also CEF employees, executives. So I think we will try and address as many of these questions as possible. And I'm glad the board chair has assisted with the tax matter. We do recognize that it is something that is quite urgent, and it's also true that PetroSA on its own is going to have difficulties addressing it. It needs to be addressed at the highest level. The financial situation of PetroSA, of course, we know that is originating from the closure of the refinery, and because of the feedstock that ran out. We have this partnership that collapsed, that was going to look at bringing it back on stream, which was quite a setback for us. We are on an urgent basis evaluating the alternatives that have been presented here, Q3, which is before the end of this year. We need to make a decision on that. It's not necessarily going to be an easy decision. I think we were transparent about the considerations. If you look at the size of this refinery, that in itself is a challenge, and I think this is going to be one of the difficulties in finding a partner, is actually whether they find this an attractive partnership to have. So it's not necessarily an easy solution, but there is absolute commitment to have the refinery back on stream. There is no plan whatsoever to liquidate PetroSA. The policy direction given to PetroSA is to bring the refinery back on stream. And there is no option that is off the table. I mean, you've heard that Sunpack Refinery also has plans of reopening a crude refinery. We are also talking to them about optimizing, because these are all assets within the same group. So I don't necessarily want to talk much about all of these options now. They have to be evaluated technically, following the setback of Gazprom not coming through. And I think as the board, we will be more confident once we've evaluated these, and we recognize that we must do that urgently. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Lorima, are you Was there another question?
Yes, Chair, you've asked a question around Zanin. The status of Zanin, it's still operating. We do have sales and team members that are sitting in Zanin. We focus more on customer own collection to bring their trucks and collect the product from Zanin. Together with the Bloemfontein depot, both of them are still operating. Although it is sub-minimal because we're not up to the full capacity through some of the maintenance work that is required to be done in certain intervals. Otherwise, those two facilities, they are still operational. And then, I'm not sure that Ms. Lang can be able to get into this or it was answered. Is it possible to get a partner with size on our head? The partner you can get, but the risk is quite high. In my view, in a sense that the demands they can put together and take advantage of our situation, that could be the challenging part that we could have. But in terms of partners we can, but each other, there are a lot of engagements and negotiations that might be required to get into that space. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Lorima, do you have a follow-up?
No follow-up. Mr. Chair, I mean, there are so many issues here, and we don't really have enough time. All I'd like to say is, can we, with some urgency in the new year, start addressing this? I mean, that'll be a couple of months down the line, and maybe the picture will become a little clearer by then. But I really think that we have to sit down with SFF and PetroSA and talk this thing through in a full day.
Noted. We'll look into that. Honorable Mhlongo.
Thanks, through you, Chair. I'm having two folds of question. The first one is directed to SFF. My voice is so, pardon me. To SFF, in the presentation you mentioned a strategic stock agency agreement. If possible, you can give us detail or elaborate on that milestone or what we can expect. And to PetroSA, I'm sorry for taking you back, but referring to page 19 on performance against predetermined objectives, you have said you had sales of 3 billion liters of finished product target that were not met. Has there been any consequence management taken for PetroSA for not meeting the 3.5 billion volume target? The second question is, which PetroSA assets has been leased to Sanepis and what is remaining in the legacy entity? Question number 3, the last one, how long has PetroSA had the decommissioning liability shortfall of 6.2 billion rands, and what immediate plans are in place to address the shortfall?
Thank you. Are you done? Can we get the responses? SFF?
Thank you for the question. On the strategic stock agency agreement, are you referring to us transferring it to SANPC? So what has happened is the strategic stock agency agreement is the mandate of SFF given to us through the National Energy Act. When the two departments were separated and we had the DEE come onto place, the National Energy Act fell on the side of DEE and not on minerals and petroleum. So hence, we as SFF and SANPC then petitioned our parent company, which is CEF, who then interacts with DMPR to then deal with DEE on a ministerial level to transfer this agency. There is the SANPC bill that will be coming into, that will be promulgated soon, that is on the portfolio committee and in Parliament. But even if that happens, it doesn't mean that the agency agreement is completely handed over. So it is something that the two, that needs to be worked out on ministerial level. And it has been escalated and it has been, it is in that arena right now. So we are waiting for feedback.
Thank you. PetroSA.
Thank you, Chair. In response to the questions asked, I'll start with the last one. How long has the decommission shortfall been in place? I can refer probably for the last 5 years. I must also mention that at every financial year, the provision is revised. The contribution that makes the provision is the rig rate, which we don't have a rig as the entity and as the department. So you need a rig to be able to do the work for the decommission, which we don't have. And then we also need the feedstock to make sure that you do some injections, to plug certain wells to do that. So that number fluctuates and changes year on year of the provision that we need to put in place. And thirdly, the method that the decommission is utilized, it does contribute to how much that decommission provision is. And currently, we are putting a process in place to have a standard method on how the decommission is calculated, because PetroSA is the only entity in South Africa that has got that facility, and obviously the manner to which that calculation is done, it's not a standard that was developed and that is available. So we're using a consultant that is assisting us to make sure that those assumptions that are being utilized are appropriate. So we are maintaining that we do the right thing in terms of putting a provision on the financials to rehabilitate and put back the area that we have been working on, while we're really trying to also increase the investment, so that that delta has been there. But obviously, there are, as I said earlier, we do put some processes or some initiatives in place to try and catch up, which is going to take a bit of a time until we are back on stream, and then we have some funds that are available on the operations, and then we start building up again. And then the next question was whether there are any assets that have been leased to SANPC. The manner to which the SANPC has been put together, that the word right way. There are phases. There's phase 1 and the phase 2. In phase 1, for PetroSA, there are no assets that has been transferred on a lease basis to SANPC. The only thing that have happened for phase 1 is the transfer of the employees within the support services that have been taken over by SANPC. Now, in phase 2, that's when we'll be looking at the assets only once they are performing positively and profitable, because we don't want to kill two entities at the same time. You have PetroSA that is not performing, and then you have SANPC bringing the burden of PetroSA in SANPC. That's not the intention. What is key for us is to make sure PetroSA is back, is reinstated, started to make profits, and be self-sustainable, then gets transferred to SANPC, and then winding PetroSA out as that progresses. Otherwise, at this point in time, there are no assets that has been listed. But I do have Mr. Braff, maybe can be able to concur on what I'm saying. And then targets not met, the 3.5 billion. What are the consequence management that have taken place? My colleague have indicated the reasons why we have not achieved. Sorry. We have not achieved our target of 3.5. Our single source customer that we had, because if I can look at the numbers that we were selling to Eskom, there was a month where we sold about, a year rather, we sold about 800 million alone to Eskom. And our plan was really revolving around making sure as the mandate that we have for the security of supply and to avert the load shedding challenge that we had. So we had to plan such that we don't compromise that process. So through the operations within Eskom that had improved, that number we could not achieve. Hence, we are looking at other alternatives to make sure that we ramp up our volumes, even looking at the product mix that we are selling, LPG, loops, aviation, so that we're not focusing only on the white products, which is the petrol and diesel. So in terms of the consequence management, there is a monitoring that is in place where even the shareholder is putting us to task on what volumes are we selling on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, such that there are even the recovery plans in areas where we have not achieved our plans. But I must say it has been difficult, not only because of anyone's doing. If we are unable to buy the product because of the letters of credit, because of our financial position, it is something that is a very difficult to appoint it to or to attach it to one person that might not have done what they need to do. So that is where we are. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mhlongo, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, sir. Do you perhaps have anyone who is acting as a consultant, or have you appointed anyone as a consultant? And when was the consultant appointed by PetroSA? The consultant that is helping you to determine the decommissioning liabilities.
We have appointed an entity called DNV, which we went to the tendering process. We evaluated them. This is the second year running, having this entity that is assisting on the decommission liability calculation and the method. So we do have an entity that is assisting on the decommission liability calculation, which also gets, AG have audited that process and engage that entity as well to make sure the process that was followed was in line with our policies. So yes, we do have.
Are you fine? Okay, Honorable Selepe.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me start by reading here my summary, then ask this question to SFF. If the market indicates that the customers prefer to buy oil immediately rather than store it, then does SFF storage make any business sense? It is feasible. The annual report indicates 10.9 million was flagged by external audit for non-compliance to competitive binding rules, and 564 million irregular expenditure linked to the tender issue in January 2024 relating to the supply for diesel to Eskom. Then my question, what were the specific reasons the external audit flagged 10.9 million for non-compliance with competitive binding rules? 2, which internal controls failed, allowing the non-compliance with 10.9 million to occur? 3, what corrective measures have been put in place to prevent future binding irregularities? 4, can you provide details of the 564 million irregular expenditure on diesel supply tender? That was for SFF chairperson. Then for PetroSA, let me start here. Let me start here, Chair, with PetroSA. Just made mention that SARS is in your neck. Were you notified by SARS that they are coming for you, or you were ambushed? If then you were notified, what was the measures taken after getting that notification? And then, isn't it that PetroSA is in this challenge because of perhaps maybe it's an impact caused by the money that you've been owed by Narco Energies, the money that you paid, the PetroSA, we know that is sold 933 million diesel to Narco Energy, and giving them that diesel without any payment. The last time we checked, 825 million was still owing. Has Narco Energy paid the PetroSA as yet? Then has the senior executive who approved this transaction been identified, and the disciplinary processes were taking place for this senior executive who did that? Perhaps you are in this trouble with SARS because of that, and that is taxpayers' money. We need to know about that. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Slepe. The way you are pronouncing Nako, it's like you don't have a Sotho blood in your veins. SFF?
Chair, if I may, maybe just the first question and see if I will answer the second one. So the first question, if I've got it correct, you said if the market indicates that customers buy oil now, does it really make business sense to have a Saldanha terminal? Am I correct? Is that the question? Okay. So the oil storage or the crude storage market is dependent on two things. Either we're in a contango market where the oil price is low and everybody wants to store. That is when SFF does very well, and the last time we did well was in 2020 with COVID, and before that in 2016 because we had a prolonged contango. Otherwise, SFF is the crude storage market is what we call in backwardation, because the price is high, and CFO spoke earlier about what is the real sweet spot when people start storing. So when the price is high, nobody wants to store it because they want to sell it as quickly as possible. So that means that we are very dependent on geopolitical pressures. We are very dependent on the market, and the global headwinds can really affect our business. That said as well, as the previous question from the other honourable member with regards to the strategic stocks mandate that we have a dual mandate. So we belong to the state, we are NPO, and our mandate was to make sure that we ensure energy security for the country. So one of the tanks in Mossel Bay is where we store this crude for energy security. The rest of the tanks, there were 6 in Saldanha, which equates to 45 million barrels. The other 5 we rent out commercially so that we can fund the strategic stock mandate. So that is the reason why. And that is the business that's subjected to the geopolitical pressures, that's subjected to the oil price and all of those things. So the money that we make we in the landlord business. It's alleged that we sell. The rent that we receive for storing for these traders and big companies is really to support the mandate and support the company. And this is the situation that we find ourselves in. I hope that answers the question. If there is follow-up.
I will determine whether there's follow-up.
Oh, sorry, Chair.
PetroSA? Is there a question that was not... yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It was in relation to the second question in relation to the other irregular expenditure, which I did not touch on when I presented because I focused on the bigger value. The 10 million that you make reference to in relation to the competitiveness where we weren't compliant. So about 7 odd million of that is in relation to one specific tender as well. It was in relation to a crane. So when we went out to market, it was specific. We've been trying to move away from vague specifications, but I think in this instance, it actually kind of came to haunt us. We went out with a specific request for a 30-ton crane. The bidders, most bidders responded with quotations or bids related to a 30-ton crane, but there was one specific bidder, which was the one that we awarded to, where they came in with a 35-ton crane, so a higher specification, but the price was lower. So we took it from a value for money point of view. We're getting something of a higher quality, superior range at a lower price. But when AG reviewed the documentation, they felt that we're not compliant in terms of PFMA and in terms of 217 because they felt that the principles of fairness, transparency, competitiveness, etc. was not upheld, even though that they do acknowledge that we got something that was better at a cheaper price. So in relation to which controls failed, it's effectively evaluating our bid in relation to the evaluation criteria, basically not doing a like for like. So those controls failed. In relation to the corrective measures, we did not agree with AG on the specific one. So this is one of those areas that we actually wanted to refer to, or it's in the progress of being referred to National Treasury, and we also have internal audit coming in to do a reassessment, because it doesn't necessarily always mean that we 100% agree with AGSA. So this is currently still being reviewed. If we then align with AGSA, we obviously will then go through, if after the assessment and confirmation from National Treasury, we will then go through the condemnation process. In terms of corrective measures that have been put in place, we will do that once we have confirmation in terms of which side we actually align on. Honourable Member, there was another question that you asked on the diesel supply tender, and I'm not, can you please repeat, because I'm not really sure what specific diesel supply tender SFF would have done other than the 565 million that we've already spoken of.
Okay, while you refresh, you'll come with that question when you make your follow-up. Can you proceed, PetroSA?
Thank you, Chair. The question in relation to SARS notification. SARS is one of our key stakeholders. As such, we do have constant engagement with SARS, considering that we do owe them a lot of money, as well as other suppliers that we owe, to make sure that we enter into the negotiations. As indicated earlier, SARS was in our offices on Tuesday last week, where we engaged with them. Subsequent to that engagement, same day, there was a letter that was received from SARS indicating, asking for the payment plan. And then they also indicated that there's an intention for them to hold the asset. So we were aware of their intention. However, they needed, according to the letter, the request was saying, respond to us by Friday, the 5th of December. So we were still in that period of engaging and making sure we go back to SARS. And we said in the meeting that we had with them on Tuesday last week, the 25th, we'll be able to take this matter to the board on the payment plan so that we can be able to engage. As the chairperson of the board have also indicated that we need to regroup and find solutions on this matter. Unfortunately, as we met with them on Tuesday, on Wednesday, we slept with the sad news about our chairperson. So the board could not sit subsequent to the SARS meeting that we had so that we can be able to table the letter that we have received and find and put the response together so that we can engage with them. So in the letter, as I've indicated, they did say that there is an intention. Intention does not mean they're going to do what they have done. So obvious, when we engage them now, they said it is part of their process, of which SARS, we know SARS is the law enforcement, and if you block them in doing certain things, it will be as if you are, you are interfering with their work. So that is where we are. As I said, it's our key stakeholder. We always maintain that type of a relationship with them. And then now, the other question that was asked, are we in this position of owing SARS 3.5 billion because of the amount that was owed by NACO Energy? If I can summarize in this, there's a claim between these two entities, between PetroSA has got a claim on NACO, as well as NACO has got a claim on PetroSA. So when we look at these two amounts, what PetroSA owes NACO and what NACO owes PetroSA is sitting around about 250 million. We owe SARS 3.5 billion. So we are not in the situation that we are because of the 250 million that is owed by NACO when we have to compare these two amounts. So it is a process that is taking its own direction in terms of finding solutions to clear and finalize the amounts that are being owed between these two entities. And then in terms of how did we get into the transaction and whether there are any officials that have been put to task, there is a process of putting a report together which will be presented to the board after the work that was done by internal audit. It will be through that report that will determine if there was any wrongdoing from any officials, and then the process of accounting by those officials, I think, will be able to take place subsequent to that report being tabled to the board audit committee, and then from there it will go to the board. So that is where we are in terms of that process. But in summary, the position that we're at around owing these lot of people, it's not even equivalent to the amount that these two entities owe to each other. So it's cumulatively, as I've indicated, continuous losses that we've been making. The 3.5 billion compared to the 300 million we are making as a margin has put us in this position. Also, I think the last point that I want to share is that while PetroSA is a Schedule 2 entity, it is expected to be commercially viable. So from the fiscals, we don't get any allocation. I would love one day, Chair and DG, probably we can get kind of allocation, but that is not the intention. As the Schedule 2 entity, we need to be making our own money and sustain the business. That is why we've got all these projects that we're working on. So we're really trying to be as vigilant as possible in what we do. Thanks.
Thank you. Follow-up question?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think the question that I've posed with regards to the PetroSA indeed was deliberate, not that the whole money that you are owing to SARS is because of you that you are being owed by NACO. But that money need to be paid back. This is a state-owned company. You cannot allow this private company to own the state-owned company for such long. And then the processes of disciplinary, why is it taking so long? I think CEF need to do better with regarding to the approach of accountability on your companies that are affiliating under CEF, because we cannot allow, it has been long overdue, this issue of PetroSA and NACO pending, and then there's nothing we've been giving as an update with regarding to this matter. We need to know time to time. There's a lot happening with monies. We cannot allow the state to be captured again. Then I want to repeat the question that you requested, that the annual report that indicated the 10.9 million was flagged by the external audit for the non-compliance to competitive binding rules, and 564 million irregular expenditure linked to the tender issued in January 2024 relating to the supply of diesel to ESCOM. That was the question.
Through you, Chair, thank you. Okay, so I had touched on this in my earlier presentation. So the 565 million was in relation to the diesel scenario. So the trading team from PetroSA had moved over to SFF. Under PetroSA had a trading policy and they were exempted from the triple PFA. But those were not applicable on SFF. So SFF did not have a trading policy in place, nor did it have a triple PFA exemption. So effectively what needed to have happened was that SFF should have followed a normal procurement process, compliant with SCM processes, and compliant with all applicable legislation such as triple PFA. But the trading team did everything under the auspices of the PetroSA trading policy, which had never been adopted by the SFF governance structures. So that was effectively irregular because it was non-compliant with SCM related legislation. So the sale was actually to PetroSA on-sold to ESCOM. We received value for money. The product was delivered, but the issue here was the non-compliance in relation to SCM-related legislation, and hence it was recorded as irregular. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Sanne.
Thank you, Chairperson. Partly covered. On top of my list was the SARS issue, which is a worrying issue to us as honorable members sitting in this room. Let me not repeat it, Chair, because they've already responded. And on SFF, on the storage contract, has SFF been proactive in searching for uptakes and ensuring that there is more than one customer that is ensuring the fulfillment of that target? And number two, Chair, the current irregular expenditure of SFF is too high. Even though most of it has been identified internally, what is the impact of the expenditure and how is it being managed? And then number three, Chairperson, what are some of the tangible steps that have been taken by SFF to ensure that it supports the long-term growth and sustainability of the strategy on SANPEC? And then my last question, Chairperson, is there complete refurbishment of the Milnerton crude oil terminal on track with regards to the report provided by SFF? Or are there any challenges we should know as the committee? This would be a similar situation with the LPG, Avedia pipeline and Beth 104 upgrades. Any challenges we should be aware of as a committee? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. SFF.
Thank you. So in relation to the first question on the storage contract, has SFF been proactive? So yes, we have been trying to get customers, but the market conditions with the oil price being where it's at is not conducive. Generally, when the market is between $50 to $55, that's when we really have people knocking on our doors to want to make use of the space in our storage tanks. But the team has definitely been trying to secure additional customers. But during the 24-25 financial year, it was only the one that we managed, and only in relation to a reservation fee for that specific tank. But from the 1st of May, those tanks are now being managed by the SANPC. So that sort of touches on your last question as well. So SANPC is now in the process of ensuring that those tanks now get marketed and looking to secure customers for those tanks. There is something that's currently in development but not yet secured. So there are discussions underway with a potential customer. I agree. The irregular expenditure identified is very high. It's very odd for SFF as well. And this, as mentioned in the earlier question as well, is a singular transaction of 565, which is the bulk of the amount. How it's being managed is obviously as soon as it was identified that the transaction was not compliant with applicable SCM related legislation, the transaction was immediately stopped. And we went through the process of then going to the required governance structures to get the required policies, etc., approved, and also trying to get the triple PFA exemption. But SFF only had the trading authority to trade up until the end of the financial year. But this aspect too in relation to trading has now moved over to SANPC, or it's in the process of being moved over to SANPC. As soon as SANPC has the required licenses, the trading department would also move over. We've gone through the process of applying for condonation in relation to the irregular expenditure identified. It's been through the Loss Control Committee, etc. And the only matter that's still left outstanding now is in relation to the consequence management, which we are trying to resolve. Some of the people have moved over to SANPC as part of the transition. So between the two CEOs, they are looking as to how the consequence management aspect can be managed. In relation to the refurbishment of Milnerton, is it on track? So all our previous attempts in relation to Milnerton, whenever we've gone out to market, it did not yield the required results in terms of adequacy of suppliers that had actually responded to those bids. So we've decided to, okay, this is also part of the projects that have moved over from SFF to SANPC. And the approach now is rather to appoint a consultant that's going to do a market demand study and develop a business case in relation to Milnerton. So this is how the SANPC is now tackling the Milnerton refurbishment scenario. And then the last question was in relation to the tangible steps to support the SANPC. So all SFF employees have transitioned over into SANPC. Saldanha Milnerton Montague has been leased and assigned, and that assets are 100% under the care of SANPC. Then during Q2 of the current year, Avidia as well as Lineful has moved over. Some of the other aspects that are still outstanding is in relation to the strategic stock, but that is outside of the SFF level of control. We require a decision to be made at ministerial level. In terms of funding, there's still discussions in relation to how that situation can be managed, and we're looking at alternatives to a loan, given the fact that SANPC did not meet the requirements in terms of ability to pay the loan, and also the guarantee that was supposed to be in place was no longer able to be in place. So from a SFF point of view, we have to do our required fiduciary duties when considering advancing funding. So as mentioned, we're looking at alternative approaches to support the SANPC on the funding aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have, you are fine? Okay, that concludes the list of honorable members who wanted to ask questions. Maybe if I can ask the last one to PetroSA. CFO, the contract of helicopters, is it still alive?
Yes, Chair, we just went out on tender recently because it was expiring on the 30th of November 2025. We went on the market, we received bids, we did the evaluation, and it was awarded to the successful bidder.
For the past 2 or 3 years that I've passed by Mossel Bay, I no longer see that thing, I don't know what to call it, inside the ocean, which I thought was the reason for helicopters. What is happening?
So there were 2 I-10 or facilities that were in the sea. There's the FA platform, which is about 80 kilometers into the sea. And then there was also a, what did we call that? The Orca. The Orca we were using when we were drilling Oryx, and we used it to store the product. But because Oryx, that crude that we used to drill from there is no longer available, so that is one of the assets that we had to part with. We sold that asset because it was no longer in use. That's why you don't see it anymore, Chair. That one was even closer, as you could say. You could see it as you were driving along N2. But the FA platform, you won't be able to see. It's inside the sea, so that one is still in place.
Is it the one that necessitates a tender for helicopters?
That's correct, Chair. We do have people that are there to man that facility because we need to have lights on such that any ships that are moving around, they can be able to see. And due to the connection that are still on the ground, so that they can be able to monitor any movement that is happening there. So we do have those people that are there alternating every second week. So the helicopter is bringing those people in and out as and when it is required as well.
Is it the new company or another company?
Same entity, Chair.
You were not here when the presentation was made. Eh? You can go ahead. In fact, let me start with Honorable Ntlangwini, who had a question for SFF before they even presented. And then I will come to Honorable Zondi. Is there anyone else? Okay, gone. Honorable Ntlangwini?
No, thank you, Chair. No, the one of SFF, I was already answered in the question session of members. I just want to check on the feedback now about the selling of, I will say it for lack of a better word, a crane or whatsoever. To whom was it sold and what was the market-related price for it? Thank you.
Chair, I don't have the number at this point in time. Something that we can respond to. What we did, we look at non-core assets that could assist us to generate some revenue in the absence of any other alternative, because it was one of the facets that we had to keep people as well. So we felt, what is the point of bringing or of keeping that facility when it's no longer utilized for what it was intended? But I don't have the number. But we did go to the market to get a number that is according to the evaluation that we've received, but we can provide that number.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Zondi. I won't ask whether you have a follow-up question or not. Okay, Honorable Zondi.
Thank you, Chairperson. Again, my apologies. I had to go to another meeting quickly. Chairperson, my first question is with regards to what was presented when I was still here that, and this is PetroSA, that PetroSA cannot purchase directly from refining companies, but it has to buy from these middlemen companies at higher prices because it cannot provide a credit assurance. So I assume this makes PetroSA, it makes it hard for PetroSA to compete in terms of the market with regards to prices. Right, that's the assumption. So this would mean even with diesel selling to Excom, it would be at higher market prices, since it's very hard for PetroSA to then compete in the market. But I also just want to ask as well, just as a confirmation, there was a report, I believe in 2023, which said the price at the time that oil majors were selling to Eskom, were selling diesel to Eskom with was about 20 rands per liter. And it was alleged that PetroSA is selling at 23 rands 50 per liter and selling diesel which is in excess of 50 million liters. I just want a confirmation if these allegations are false. Then the next one is with regards to how long will it take to stabilize PetroSA and the winding down process? I think this also goes for SFF as well. How long will it take for it to be stabilized and then for it to wind down and then eventually be incorporated into SENPEC? Then my other question, Chairperson, and I think I would like to start this with this prelude because I have been accused before of not wanting to let this issue go, but there is a reason for that. In 2002, PetroSA was founded as a company, and there was corruption that happened there, or the diversion of funds from a company called Imvume to a political party that I will not name. Then in 2015, there was also payments that were irregular, which some people had to repay about 83 million to PetroSA due to those irregular payments. In 2016, PetroSA was forced to impair about 14.4 billion in asset due to a failed gas project, Equasi. Now, I give this prelude to show there's been a history of systemic failure to safeguard the finances of PetroSA, which then brings me to the Gazprom Bank deal, which failed as well. Now, this is a pattern, which is why I insist that there is some sort of investigation into that particular deal as to how, not only how it failed, but how did we get to choose Gazprom Bank Africa and Middle East, which is a subsidiary of Gazprom Bank Russia. Gazprom Bank Russia was under sanctions at that time. And Gazprom Bank works in a way, in science we say, whether light, we're not sure whether light is a particle or if it's a wave. It has that duality. It's the same with Gazprom Bank Russia. Sometimes when it's required, it is a state-owned entity. If a tender requires private companies, it is a private company. That is how it operates, but we chose that one. So my question is, with the awarding of that tender to Gazprom Bank Africa, did they submit a credit assurance as it was the requirement of the RFP for that particular deal, and if it is possible to get some of those details. I know there's a news outlet that submitted a PI application for the same information as well. I think as an oversight body, we do also need to satisfy ourselves with regards to that. And I do also, Chair, think maybe it's something we'd look at as a committee, but I truly do believe there should be an inquest with regards to that, because we have new plans now on how we are going to restart that Mossel Bay refinery. But this issue is a systemic issue, and that deal has set the refining capacity of the country, back by a couple of years, and there should be a proper investigation into that. Then my other question is, how much is PetroSA's total decommissioning liability in terms of NEMA at this particular moment? I believe in 2020 it was about 12.4 billion rands, and there was a deadline of January 24 in 2024 to either pay the shortfall or make an arrangement with the Minister of Petroleum with regards to how that shortfall would be paid. If this didn't happen, that would be a criminal offense. I just want to know where we are with regards to that, and currently as it stands, how much is that decommissioning liability? Chair, I have more questions, but I do realize I'm standing between members and their dinner, so I'll stop there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. PetroSA.
Chair, I will answer some of the questions. Some I might hand over to my colleagues. The last question around the provision. The provision is currently sitting at about 10. I'll double check now the financials. It's in the copy of the financial that I've shared, but I'll give you the number shortly. Then I will skip the Gazprom question. I think it summarizes what you were asking in terms of the inquest that must be provided. I think it's something that we can take back. Looking at my principles here. The purchase price. So the price for diesel as well as petrol is regulated in South Africa. You have the retail price that gets published on a monthly basis, as well as the wholesale price, list price that is published. When we sold the diesel to Eskom, we utilized the published price that gets communicated and sitting on the website from DMPR or DMRA. Our submission to Eskom at the time of them awarding the supply of their diesel to PetroSA, we were to sell to Eskom at that price, which the wholesale is price, and we negotiated a discount that we can be able to offer to Eskom. So that is how we were selling the product. So the trick here is for us to buy the product at a cost less what is published in South Africa, which that's what we are saying. It's a challenge for us because of the finance cost that tends to be charged by the traders that are willing to take a risk on PetroSA when PetroSA are unable to approach the banks to give the facility for us to have some kind of a security. Most of the time in these transactions is the letter of credit that gets offered or accepted by the refineries. So the traders are able to do that because they're dealing with a lot of product on different countries. So that is that report that came out in 2023. There was a response that was offered by PetroSA, even on the media, through our CEO at the time. So it is not true that we were selling to Eskom high. We used the published price that is available. How long will it take to stabilize PetroSA so that it can be able to be wind down and incorporated to SANPC? Our key focus is to reinstate the refinery. With the presentation that was made by my colleague next to me around the reinstatement and looking at ramping up from 1846 and other initiatives to make sure we bring the refinery back into stream. We have the refinery self-sustainable such that it record profits, because the reason for it not to be transferred now, you don't want to bring something that is not working on something that we are intending to make sure that it is the entity that will represent the oil and gas industry or business in South Africa. So the plan is to make a refinery to be operating, not only to operate, it must operate at a profit. Then it is incorporated. So there are timelines which my colleague, I think, said he was not going to go through, but that plan is in place. We've been given a matching order from the shareholder to make sure that that reinstatement is achieved, to make sure that we do bring back the refinery into stream. I just want to give you the number now, Chair, and the member on the decommission provision. Or the other question that you've asked is how much, the reason you want the amount, you want to know what is our position to comply with the NEMA Act. You're quite correct. It was a requirement that by January 2024, the funds that we have do coincide with the provision that is in the balance sheet. That requirement then was moved to around July 2024. But just before that date, there was another correspondence that we received from the FFE to rather, what is the English word I can use there? To move away from that date. And now there is no date currently that has been set to promulgate that requirement. We're still waiting for the FFE to give us the date of when that funding is required to be in place. It's a financial provisioning that each entity needs to have, so that whatever that is in the balance sheet, there are funds that are set aside to talk to that. Hence, our key focus is to grow what we have now, so that by the time the FFE come back with a date, we can be able to present, because they said you can come and present to us what plans do we have so that we can be able to address the shortfall. So there's no date at this point in time. That is also being recorded on our financial statement, which AG have audited, and we're happy with that. Hence, there's no non-compliant that has been raised by Auditor General with regards to that particular requirement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I just maybe to add on the ultimate transfer of PetroSA and SFF. The manner in which the merger has been effected is going to require that some semblance of SFF and PetroSA is preserved, because it's a lease and assign, and the lease requires those two parties to exist. However, the idea is that as the assets are getting ready and are becoming free of problems of debt and so on, that these could be transferred. Hence the earlier presentation that there will be some corporate governance preserved within the entities, even if they operate just as a skeleton. The this gives me an opportunity actually to talk about the trading business, because the trading business and this issue of not being able to buy from the refineries. If you look at the accumulation of assets by Sanpac, it should not have these problems. So Sanpac is being set up to be able to do what PetroSA could not do, which is to buy from the refineries. And at the moment, the role that PetroSA has is to find a market for the products. And that's what the remaining team at PetroSA has to do before that team also is ultimately transferred, because you have to sort out the problem of buying directly from refineries on the one hand, and you also have to sort out the over-reliance on selling to a single customer, namely Eskom, and actually find the market. So the merger does give us a possibility for addressing that in the immediate future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, can I respond to the question of how much is our decommissioned liability? Thank you, Chair. The decommissioned liability balance that we have, which we provided for in the financials, is at March 2025. We opened with a balance of 9,963,430,000. And then when we do that calculation, there is an interest rate that you utilize that is gets to increase the amount, which was increased with about 555 million rands. However, in terms of the work that I mentioned, that it is done by the consultant to look at the elements of calculating that decommission liability. So it came with a reduction of about 705 million rands, giving us a total of 9,812,956 million at a company level. Now, at the group level, because now we need to take care of also the Ghana facility that we have, because it's similar kind of work that we are doing also in Ghana. We started with an amount of 10,230,621,000, and then the closing amount after those elements that I've just mentioned at a company level were taken into consideration. We closed with a balance of 10,063,097,000. So that is the balance that we have for the decommission liability in the financials. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
No, Chair, it's just questions that were not answered. The first one was, or maybe it was answered when I was not here, but it was from my earlier question session with regards to the funding for the GTL refinery in Mossel Bay, in terms of if it was going to come from Infrastructure South Africa, or if, for the feasibility study, if it was going to come from Infrastructure South Africa, or if PetroSA would be footing the bill with regards to that, where exactly the fund is the funding going to come from. And then the second one that wasn't answered was with regards to the Gazprom Bank credit assurance with regards to the 2023 RFP, if they did indeed provide a credit assurance for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, PetroSA.
Thank you, Chair. So, Honourable Member, the question, your initial question regarding Gazprom Bank and ISA was, we did comprehensively cover that, unfortunately, in your absence. But maybe I should repeat the answer then. So, when we had partnered with Gazprom Bank, we also had a co-funding arrangement with ISA. They were going to fund the feasibility study. But at a point where GBA, that's Gazprom Bank Africa, where GBA became sanctions listed, which is towards, I think, December of 2024, then ISA did express their hesitance to proceed with the co-funding. In fact, they were explicit in saying they will not co-fund feasibility if then Gazprom Bank is also funding something. So because now we have subsequently exited that relationship, which is something that happened just before we closed the period we are reporting for now. So we will then be reopening that discussion with ISA and other DFIs. But what we've also done, Honorable Member, is that we didn't then sit and wait for that. We've continued to actually conduct pre-feasibility work on the various options that are being considered for reinstatement. So as we re-engage for funding later, we'll be at a further point down the project gated framework. So the short answer to your question is that when GBA was in the picture, ISA said they're not going to co-fund with them. But because they're out of the picture, we are boldly re-entering that negotiation. But in the meantime, we have carried out some of the work so that we don't lose the benefit of time. Thank you, Chairperson. Then, yeah, the assurance part, I think I'll be happy if a colleague covers that. I don't have sufficient information on that at the moment.
Chair, I will need to verify for that response from the operations team, and we can be able to provide that response probably in writing if need be. Thanks.
Okay. There is a need to provide it in writing, so you will have to do that. Honorable members, that brings us to the end of today's marathon. We would like to thank honorable members for juggling in between meetings and also thank the department and CEF for giving us these presentations. DG, we are going to, in fact, Chairperson Noah, the first oversight in 2026 will be also going to SAPREF as well as Island View. So we will be interacting very soon with SANPEC around those issues. And I stand to be corrected that I had the presentation of CEF saying by January, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, there will be a plan on PetroSA. Did I hear you correctly? So that I'm able to proceed with what I want to say.
So, Chair, we said that in Q3, PetroSA will be able to give us a feasibility study on the reinstatement of their refinery, and then in Q4, SNPC refinery will come with a bankable business case for the refinery.
Okay. Ms. Boss, we are noting that there must be a follow-up on that so that we make sure we move properly. We'll look into it, Honorable Zondi, the inquest you are looking for, and see if it's feasible on our program. But we will discuss the program, obviously, and be able to agree or disagree on whether we should do that. I must say, DG, I'm more worried than I was when I entered here about PetroSA. I don't know how you are going to deal with SARS, but please give it priority to work on whatever amicable solution you can work on, so that you deal with other progressive issues than I don't want to call it distraction, because they are not distracting you. They want what is due to them, and you must pay them. But let me thank you for this session, and I guess we will see each other next year, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Do you have an announcement, Ms. Boss? So honorable members, I hope you saw that tomorrow at 3 we're having a virtual meeting, which is a continuation of the meeting we held that was presenting on the cadastral system. So tomorrow they will be able to do a demonstration as we had asked. So it's 3 o'clock tomorrow, virtual. It's scheduled for 3 to 6, so we have been exempted as well to attend to this issue. So if you don't have any item in the plenary, you must know you are exempted from plenary by tomorrow. That concludes the business of today, and the meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much.